Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are, ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs. Hope you are well. Before we get into the meat and potatoes, please head over to grahamfrench247.com/donate. There's plenty of ways you can give there. But more importantly, if you think I'm doing a good job, please leave a comment, subscribe, give a thumbs up, and if you can spread the word and tell your friends and neighbours about this, all the better. Thanks very much. Good evening from the UK. If you think this is the second time you've seen me in very quick succession, no, you are not going mad. I've decided to try and redo this live stream because I had some technical issues, and I've listened back to the recording, and some parts of it were actually quite echoey. So I've decided to have a second go at it. I've since got rid of the first recording, so I like to do things as well as I can, and if I can't, well, I like to try and do it again. I'll just move the microphone. People think that the my little logo on my microphone's on the microphone. It's not just a graphic I've stuck on the screen. It just makes it look like it is. Giving away a few secrets there. I'm trying a few different things about this live stream. I've had some issues with the software. There are issues with the software I'm using, and I've been speaking to Anton, the guy who's one of the developers over at Streamlabs, as I'm using Streamlabs OBS. It's free software. But free software doesn't really mean it's free. It just means that the initial purchase cost is less. Sometimes the costs come at the back end, where you have to invest more time and effort, because a lot of expensive commercial software should, in theory, be a lot easier to use. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes the commercial stuff, the stuff you actually have to pay a license fee for, can be quite difficult to use, and it's not as polished and finished as you'd like to think it should be. So this is the second live stream of the day, and hopefully we've now got across any issues around any echoes. So what I am going to be doing is checking on also the chat at the same time. So if you see me not looking at the camera, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's because I'm actually trying to sort of multitask at the same time, and as a bloke, that's quite difficult to do. So I'm just checking the chat now. Yeah. Hold on, I'll put that down. I'll put that on mute so I don't actually hear myself in a loop. That'll be quite something. And so if you're currently live, I'm just saying hello there. And hopefully we can kick this off and finish it a bit better than the first time. So tonight or this morning or this afternoon, depending on where and when you are, if you're watching this in the future or if you're listening to this on one of the podcasts. Hello from Newcastle upon Tyne. Now, I've got this currently on live streaming on a handful of different platforms. I've made a conscious decision to not just have both recorded and live streams to YouTube only. I've got it on about 6 or 7 live streaming at the moment. There's Facebook, there's Twitch, there's even a Russian platform, and I'm on BitChute. I'm also on brand YouTube, and I've made a conscious decision to not solely put all of my content on one single platform, because you really are setting yourself up to fail. And I've advised other people who have got a much bigger following than I have. I mean, I'm only just over 125 subscribers at the moment. Thanks everybody, by the way, for subscribing. But I know people who've got tens of thousands of subscribers, and the YouTube is the only platform that they're using, and that's putting yourself in quite a precarious position from my perspective, because I'm all about disaster avoidance and disaster recovery as well as business continuity, and my brain just tells me that you can't put all of your eggs in one basket, and it's a very, very bad strategy to have, because you're really beholden to that one platform. And if you build an audience on one platform, and for some reason, whether it's fair or not, that platform decides to take away your channel, that's you dead in the water. You're going to effectively have to build that audience from scratch. You've already got a base there. So as long as you've got the ability to communicate with that subscriber base, you may be able to sort of transfer most of it. But most people take a bit of a hit. And most people I've spoken to people who've lost channels, and the wind is really taken out of the sails. So my advice is, if you're looking to build a channel or a brand or a business online, is to spread yourself out amongst the different channels. Now, I'm on a number. Like I say, I'm on Facebook. I'm just started on Instagram. Instagram is actually owned by Facebook, by the way. So you've got to be careful that when you do, different platforms are not all owned by the same people. I'm on YouTube, on Brand YouTube, I'm on BitChute, I'm also on Minds, I'll be also on Library. So I'll probably be on about 10 or so, between 10 and 12 different platforms. And also that's not including the podcast. I'm also making an audio version of what you're seeing now. I'm putting it into a podcast form, so it's going to be exactly the same. There's going to be minimal editing, so I can get it out as far and as wide as possible with as little interference from me as I can muster. And again, that'll be on multiple platforms. So I'm currently on Spotify, I'm on Stitcher, I'm on Apple Podcasts. I'm hopefully soon going to be on the Google Podcast as well. And again, it's a similar strategy of spreading yourself out so you're not wholly reliant on one single channel, because you really are boxing yourself in there. And so if you can build an audience, and what I have noticed is that I am getting an audience on all of these different platforms, some more than others, and I think YouTube is the biggest at the moment, but Brand YouTube and BitChute aren't that far behind. So if you can build a channel but on different platforms, and if you can spread yourself out, because these are different subscribers, then if you do lose one channel or two channels or three channels, if it's really bad, you've still got an audience elsewhere. You've still got your own platform. And on top of all of that, of all of the vlogging and the podcast channels, I've also got my own website where I'm also hosting both the audio and the video as well. So I've got my own, I'm hosting my own podcasts. And of course, that could go away as well, because I'm using Squarespace at the moment, and that may or may not continue in the sort of short to medium term. But it's a case of keeping a backup of this. So if I have to start another website with a different provider, I can do that in fairly short fashion. So it's about it's hoping for the best, but being prepared for the worst. That's the sort of the mindset you've got to have. So if you want to sign up for a newsletter, I'll be sending a newsletter out about once a month or so, just to keep you updated on stuff that's happening or stuff that's going to be coming out soon. I keep that list. It's not a case of I'm not like Google and Facebook. That won't be sold anywhere. That's a way of me being able to keep in contact with yourself on a fairly irregular basis. And if there's anything, any questions you want to ask, I'm on loads of different types of social media. Again, it's not just Twitter. I'm on Parler, I'm on Gab, I'm on Minds. So if you just sort of do a search under DuckDuckGo, not Google if you can help it, and you can find me pretty much everywhere. I'm some sort of like horseman, yeah. It's absolutely everywhere. Anyway, let's crack on with today's subject, and that's how clever are clever people. I've gone through this once already, and I don't mind doing it again, because I listened to the echo, and it was quite horrendous. So hopefully people are actually being able to hear in a more sustained and non-echoey fashion. So how clever are clever people? Now, I believe everybody is a genius in some way or fashion, and it doesn't matter if you're good at baking cakes, looking after children, fixing engines, designing things, fixing things. Someone's got their own special skill, and some people have got many skills. The polymaths of these worlds, people who can pretty much turn a hand to anything, or fix anything, or build anything, or make anything. And you've got the polyglots of the world, people who speak multiple languages. I mean, I speak a bit of French, bit of Spanish, bit of Arabic, a little bit of English, but that doesn't make me a polyglot. I mean, I'm conversational a little bit in English, and I can speak a little bit of each other language, enough to get me around like restaurants and hotels and stuff. But I'm by no means fluent in any of the other languages. But some people say I'm not even fluent in English at all. But cleverness can be defined by many different metrics, and I'm going to look at one today, and that's it's IQ. Now, I've got some screenshots. Again, I'm having some issues with this software. I've spoken to Anton, who works for Streamlabs. He's a developer. He's hopefully going to bring an update out soon, so I can actually do the old scrolly holy, which I can't do at the moment because I'm having issues with the software. So on previous vlogs I've done, I've been able to scroll up and down and interact with the website. Not in this case. That's the bit that's broken. But what I can do though is I'll talk through what IQ is. And I used to think IQ stood for intelligence questions, but it actually stands for intelligence quotient. So I've known that for a while, but when I was a bit younger, I used to think IQ stood for intelligence questions, because it did ask you some questions about your intelligence. So what is IQ? It's a total score. It's derived from a set of standardized tests or subtests designed to assess human intelligence. Again, it's just one element, I think, of human intelligence. The abbreviation IQ was coined by a psychologist called William Stern, and he was a German guy who worked at the University of Breslau, and he actually advocated that in a book in 1912. So the IQ, as it is known today, has been around for over 100 years. So historically, IQ is a score obtained by dividing a person's mental age score, not just mental age score obtained by administering an intelligence test. Now, I've taken a few of these psychometric tests. When you join the armed forces, you've got to take one of these tests. They never tell you what your score is. It's a case of you're either in or you're out. And I do know in the American armed forces, especially the American Army, not just all of the armed forces, you've got to have a score of at least 73. And Jordan Peterson talks about this as well, that the technology in modern weapons these days is at such a level that you've got to have a minimum score of 73 in order to be intelligent enough to use these weapons. And they are becoming more and more complex. It's not a case of sort of pull the pin and throw the grenade these days. It's some of these weapons are highly complex. So the intelligence test was taken, and then it was the person's chronological age was used in order to divide the actual score up, and then the fraction from that was multiplied by 100 to get your score. So the average person has a score of 100, but there's a standard deviation, 15 IQ points up or down from that. So if you've got an IQ score between 85 and 115, that's the sort of your average score of human intelligence. So if you're in that realm, you're what's classed as normal in quotes, and but it's either end is the abnormal bit. And I don't know if you know, but an intelligent dog, a German Shepherd Alsatian, they've got an intelligent Alsatian has actually got an IQ level of about 70. So a German Shepherd can almost get in the armed forces in America, in the army, but there's about 2.5% of a population scores below 70. So 2.5%, that's every 2.5 people out of 100, don't know you get half a person, is not as intelligent as a clever German Shepherd. That's quite unusual. And these are the type of people that generally, not all of them, but you'll find that the prison population is overrepresented by people who have of a low intelligence. They tend to be more violent, and what you'll notice is that 9 out of 10 people in the prison population are men. And I'll come on to that in a moment. But also at the other end of the scale, so that's at the bottom end of the scale, so 2.5% below 70 are actually men, and 2.5% above 130, that's sort of like your genius level. That's your sort of your Marie Curies, that's your Einsteins, that's your Michael Faradays of the world, your Nikola Teslas. They would have had a score above 130, and there's only 2.5% of the population above that. But the thing is, though, is that IQ scores have been associated with factors such as morbidity and mortality, and also parental social status, and also to a substantial degree biological parental IQ. So IQ has been shown to be largely inherited, and this has been investigated for over a century. There's still a lot of debate about this, about just how inheritable IQ is. But you do generally tend to find if you see a clever kid, the parents are generally very clever. Not all the time, not all of the time, but that is the general rule. And the opposite is as well. If you've got a delinquent kid who goes around and robs and steals, you normally find they come from bad stock. The apple hasn't fallen too far from the tree, I do believe the phrase is. Again, that's not all of the time, but generally that is the case. But again, that's always fiercely debated amongst the academia of the world. So I've now got an interesting graph to show you, And this is a graph that shows the male versus female IQ distribution. So I've read quite a few articles today, and people have been arguing in these articles of who's more intelligent. Is it male or female? And what I found is it depends on who is writing the article, depending on what the outcome is. And I've generally found that people on the left tend to think that females are more intelligent, and people more in the centre tend to find that males are more intelligent. Well, again, I've heard Jordan Peterson speak about this as well, and here is a graph that shows what he's talked about previously. And for those on the podcast end of it, I've got a graph here with two bell curves on, one in red, one in blue. So the red one is just the IQ distribution. Red graph is for females, and the blue graph bell curve is for the men. And what I'm seeing here is that the bell curve for women is thinner and taller, but like a supermodel for females. And the distribution of IQ for men is shorter and fatter, a bit like a dumpy middle-aged guy. And so what you could argue from that, and it could be argued as well, is that according to this, on average, if we're just looking in the middle here, we're just looking at the centre of the bell curve, then it could be argued that women are more intelligent than men. And I'm not saying that's definite, but it could be argued. But if you look at the extremes, and if you want to consider the extremes, and I've just mentioned previously that 2.5% of the population are below 70 and 2.5% of the population are above 130. If you look at the graph here, it shows you that the distribution is wider for men. So men are at the top end of the scale. 9 out of 10 people at the top end of the scale are male. So you could argue, in that particular instance, that men are more intelligent than women, because 90% of people above 130 are men. But it could also be argued that men are nowhere near as intelligent as women, because 2.5% of the population are below 70 IQ points, and 90% of those are men. So women are clustered together closer, and therefore the peak of their intelligence average is higher than men. But at the extremities, at the low end and the top end, 90% of those are men. So you could argue men are both stupider and cleverer than women. But on average, women, according to this graph, are cleverer than men. And I don't think this will ever be agreed upon. You'll always get people who argue men are more intelligent than women, and women are more intelligent than men. And I think there's a different type of intelligence. I think what I've found in the past is that my experience shows me that men in general have more spatial abilities, more spatial awareness than women, but women have more emotional intelligence awareness than men. And again, these are just generalities, but that is what I have found. And if you go to the Netherlands, where it's a more equal society, it's more egalitarian. If you look at the studies that have been done for many years now, but for tens of thousands of participants as well, that if you look at what the difference between the jobs and the careers of men and women in the Netherlands, you'll find that the men have mostly been in the STEM fields, your science, your technology, engineering and maths, and that women generally have been in the medical and the caring professions. And that's driven by the fact that men and women are given a free choice over what they want to do. And these studies have been done for years, and it's surprised a lot of people. And again, Jordan Peterson talks about that a lot as well. And I see that a lot, because obviously I've been in the STEM fields for more than 2 decades now, and the number of women who are who are technical in the STEM fields, and have a high level of technical knowledge or ability. There's not that many women in technology. It's almost exclusively men, and there's a handful of women. It's not even 10%. It's more like 2%, maybe 3 to push. So the number of women I've worked with on projects from a technical perspective has been quite thin on the ground. I mean, some of the women I've worked with have been absolutely brilliant. And again, this is what this graph talks about. 90% of the people beyond 130 IQ points are men, but 10% are women. And I've met some of those women. I've worked with some of those women, and they're absolutely brilliant. There's just not many of them. I mean, I've had some technical issues. I did one job government project, and I had this particular type of load balancer, and it's a device that just balances web requests that come into various back-end web servers, and the only person that could actually configure it was a woman. And it took me 6 months to try and find her, because all the blokes I had to go at it just misconfigured it time and time again. When she configured it, worked perfectly. Had nothing but trouble before that. So it's not a case of women can't be intelligent. They obviously are, but there's different types of intelligence. And I've seen the spatial awareness as well kick in. And I don't know if you've ever been to some of these places, but what I'm seeing more and more now is that when you got these large organisations, one of the rules in the car park on site is that you need to, when you park your vehicle, when you leave after the day's work, you've got to drive out front ways. You've got to go move forward. You can't reverse out of parking spaces. Now I've seen that be coming in more and more. And this is just statistically safer in the car park, because a number of people apparently have been knocked over by people reversing out of a car park. So what you're supposed to do in the morning is either reverse in or drive across 2 car parking spaces, and you stop in the car parking space you're facing outwards. And I've spoken to a number of women on these sites and men, and they've told me that some women, not all of them, but some women have to get there earlier before everybody else because they can't reverse in. And I don't know if that's just a female thing or if it's just men won't admit it, but could be a bit of both actually. But yeah, so I have found in general men are better at spatial awareness than women. But, you know, what the chart shows is that women on average are more intelligent or cleverer than men, but men in the extremes, you know, at either end, top and bottom, you're below 70, above 130 are overrepresented by men, or overrepresented in those categories. But here's a question for you. Who has the highest IQ score ever recorded according to the Guinness Book of Records? Do you think it's a man or a woman? I'll let you ever think about that for a few seconds. And I'll just go and check the comments. No, apparently we seem to be doing fine. Nobody's hearing any echoes. I have actually started this. This is the second live stream I'm doing, because the first time there were some issues with the recording, with the actual microphone being quite echoey, and I listened to the recording, it was quite bad, so I've decided to do it a second time. So hopefully it sounds better this time. So the answer to the question is female. A woman called Marilyn Vos Savant. Now I don't know if you've ever heard the phrase, "Oh, you're a bit of a savant," and I think that's where this comes from. This woman, she was born in 1946 in St. Louis, Missouri, in the US. She's still alive now. She's 74. She's still an American magazine columnist, author, lecturer, and playwright. Had a bit of a busy life there, and she's listed as having the highest recorded IQ level in the Guinness Book of Records. Trouble is though, if you're deciding you want to have a crack at that category, you can't, because it's since been retired since 1990. So unfortunately, she will be the only person with the highest IQ score in the Guinness Book of Records, because that category no longer exists. So when she was born in 1946, she had a first IQ test when she was, I believe she was 10. At 10 years old, she had the IQ level of someone who was 22. And this is her claim, by the way. And also that her score, are you sitting down, ladies and gentlemen? Her score was 228. So that was a figure that was listed in the Guinness Book of Records. And it's also the figure she quotes in interviews. Now, keep in mind that Albert Einstein, who came up with a theory of relativity and the general relativity, you know, E equals mc squared, and that's been proven time and time again. That formula is absolutely correct. I do believe Einstein's IQ score was 156. That's just I'm just going to check. I should have checked that before. Einstein. All right, so some people are saying it's 140. All right, so Yeah, there's loads of questions actually over 160 or 190, but she's apparently said many times that her score is 200 and yeah, in 1990, yeah, 228, madness. But apparently there was a guy called a psychology professor called Alan Kaufman. He's an author of tests, and he's written in his book that she's given an old version of the Stanford Binet test, which calculates it slightly different to the way it should be done. And he's basically sort of recalibrated it to 186. So it's still extremely high, because he's put a deviation of 16. He's called it the mega test, and that was also reported by the Guinness Book of Records as well. But IQ tests aren't the only way of finding out if you're clever or not, and I do believe that that intelligence and people's cleverness can be measured in many different ways. Like I say, I know people who can speak a lot of different languages, polyglots. I know people who are polymaths who are good at, and I don't just mean reasonably good. I mean really good at a number of different tasks, different disciplines, different skills in the world. It doesn't matter if it's driving a car, flying a plane, martial arts, cutting down trees, fixing engines. Technology, mathematics, history, geography. There's people who excel in each one of these fields, but there's some people who excel in a number of these fields as well. And again, being a genius doesn't mean, in my view anyway, that you have to be specifically good at any one thing to an academic level. You can be excellent at one or a number of things and still have what is traditionally known as a lower level of education. But a lot of people are, especially these days, can educate themselves. And there's a number of websites where you can, sometimes for free, but sometimes there's a monthly charge, where you can actually just teach yourself literally any subject you want. And there are some disciplines in the world where you need to have your sort of classic academic qualifications. If you're going to be sort of in the medical field, you're not going to be able to read a book and then start doing a heart operation. That's not the sort of thing that you're going to get insured for starters, or even be allowed to do. But some people do fake it, and you hear all these Walter Mitty's of people who've been faking it. So you can educate yourself, and sometimes you can take exams and be qualified. I mean, there's a number of universities now that actually put their content online for you to consume free of charge. American universities started first of all, but there's a number of universities now where you could you can get the equivalent of a university education just without the qualification and without the fees as well. I think in America, in Britain, the fees are just under £10,000 a year. In America, it's hundreds of thousands of pounds people are left with from a debt perspective. It's tens of thousands in the UK, but hundreds of thousands of dollars in America. So you can get a university level education without the actual costs involved. And in Britain, there's a thing called the Open University, where you can spend a day a week or a day a month in university or in a classroom, and then at the end of it, and it normally takes a bit longer because you're spreading it over time, where you can get a degree or a master, a BA or an MA, master's degree, or a PhD. And it's all self-study. You just take the exam at the end of it. But that generally tends to be for things outside of the medical field. You can still do a psychology degree, but you're not going to do a sort of 1 day a week as a neurosurgeon. I don't think that's going to be the sort of thing. So you can be clever. You don't have to have a classic education. You don't have to be academically achieved. You don't have to have a PhD to be a clever clogs. You can be highly intelligent and have taught yourself. And there's no limit to what you can learn these days. Maybe it's not nuclear bombs. A lot of that information's been removed from the internet. It's still there if you want to find it. But there's pretty much, if you decide you want to learn about a subject, if you're passionate about a certain subject, there's literally nothing at all to stop you from getting to a very high level of expertise purely off the internet or some books. And when I started in IT, I mean, I think I mentioned in the past, I learned about email and because I didn't understand how does email work. If I send you an email and I press the send button, how does it get from my computer to your computer in seconds? And I didn't understand how that worked. And when I looked into it and how it finds where your mailbox is and how it finds the server to speak to and how it sends it to your mailbox, and spam is a real issue, and how it tries to stop the spam from being passed around with most of the traffic in the world, actually, internet traffic. All that for me was absolutely fascinating. And then you get into the how do you encrypt it and how do you digitally sign email, so you know it's definitely come from me and not some Joe Schmo who's trying to rip you off. That's what really got me into IT, and I just read book after book after book, and I just couldn't read enough. I would take books, you know, a lot of these books have 300-400 pages in. I'd read 3 or 4 on holiday. And sometimes I read a book and just get 3 bits of information out. I read 300 pages and get like 3 bits of information out, but those were absolute nuggets, absolute gold nuggets of information. And I just consume. I just couldn't get enough of it, and it's not stood me in too bad instead, actually. But it's like anything. I trained myself to learn from books, and again, that's a skill in and of itself because not everyone can do that. When I had push bikes and motorbikes, I had to teach myself how to fix stuff because I come from a poor working class background. How to fix stuff, I had to learn from a book. So I would get a Haynes manual in the UK, you know, motorbike engines. I used to read how to strip it down, fix it, build it back together, fix it back, start the engine. Hopefully it started if you've got enough fuel in it. All that was from books. And that was just a skill that I just continued and I've learned from lots of books. And but now we've got the internet, we've got videos, we've got learning websites where you can learn an awful lot to a very high degree of almost a genius level, if you like. If you're committed and you're willing to put the work in, there's nothing stopping you at all from learning almost any subject. It doesn't matter if you want to be a mechanic, airline pilot, you still have to have lessons. Want to be a musician, you want to learn how to play a guitar, you want to learn how to play Dire Straits, Brothers in Arms, for instance. Plenty of free stuff as well as paid for lessons you can get on the internet to show you exactly how to do that. And as long as you're willing to put the work in, put the practice in, put the hours in, because you can't get something for nothing, then there's nothing stopping you to get to any level of expertise you want on pretty much anything. So if you want to be like Gordon Ramsay, maybe with a bit less swearing, nothing stopping you from doing that. Right, I'm just going to see if there's any questions at all, see if we can add them. And it's all scripted. Einstein was a low-grade office clerk turned actor, not a scientist. All right, that's interesting. I'm going to do some research into that. Yep. See, I'm open-minded. I'll look into this. Thanks, Roger, for that, by the way. I will look into this type of thing because I'm always interested. They do say that history was written by the people who won, by the winners. And so that does sometimes raise questions because you've seen now what the news is like, what the propaganda is like. You know, I mean, Trump is calling it fake news for a reason. It's not just something he's come up with. There is a lot of fake news and propaganda. And again, you've got to be aware of this. And there's a lot of divide and conquer going on, especially in 2020 at the moment. There's a hell of a lot of that going on. Even, you know, and if you read, I mean, I've read all sorts of stories about what, like MI5, MI6 and the Met Police undercover units used to get up to, and then amongst various factions of society, in with all these protest groups, you know, like the CND and Greenpeace. And it was the French intelligence were accused of blowing up the and sinking the was it the Rainbow? It was called Rainbow Warrior. That was it. It was a CND or the Greenpeace ship in a French port. So there's all sorts of shenanigans going on, and it's always useful, I find, to keep an open mind, be skeptical. You know, don't believe a word I say. Go and do your own research. But I always say to people, you know, it's always best to be open-minded, be skeptical. You know, question everything. Don't just take things as read because somebody in authority told you that's the truth, you know, because sometimes they're telling you a lie. I I never believe a word that politicians say anyway. I mean, if I asked Boris Johnson what time of day it was, I wouldn't believe a word he said. I wouldn't even believe he said it was daytime. So be open-minded, be sceptical, but do your own research and make your own mind up if you think something is truthful or not. And if people are trying to berate you into accepting their point of view, and sometimes people do that, and it's fine to debate points because, hopefully during a debate you might learn something. If someone's trying to really push a point home and you think, well, why are they doing this? Just ask why a lot. I ask why a lot. Why are you saying this? Why do you demand that I believe what you say? And but be skeptical, question everything, but always do your own research and make up your own mind, and don't take anything anybody says as read. And I think that's like the white coat problem. And a lot of people are now coming out of this where, in recent history, because someone had a white coat on, a doctor, for instance, because he had a white coat on, well, he's a doctor, what he says must be true because he's a doctor. That's not the case anymore. More and more people now are skeptical, open-minded, and are willing to do their own research, willing to ask questions now. And more people are turning that way because we've been manipulated, lied to, stuff's been propagandized in the past and even today. And I think more people are becoming aware of what's going on, not just from a political sense, but just life in general. Ask more questions about stuff. Don't just take it as read as what people say is the truth, because they might have a hidden agenda, they might not. And that's not me being conspiratorial. It's just being aware of what's going on in the world and being aware of the fact that even though you're not an expert in that field, you may still be right. Because, again, I've given instances where washing of hands wasn't accepted for 30 years, and the whole hypothesis around tectonic plates wasn't accepted for about 30 years now. And I'm halfway through this book by Graham Hancock called Magicians of the Gods. And I've read a previous book called Fingers of the Gods, where he hypothesizes that the Sphinx is older than what the Egyptians and the Egyptologists tell us they are. And I'm inclined, having listened to the evidence, that I think he's right. And also the evidence from Robert Schoch and Randall Carlson as well. Again, do your own research. Don't listen to a word I'm saying. But when I went to see the Sphinx, as I've been to the pyramids at Giza, I thought it was quite unusual. That it did look a lot older. Now, I'm no expert like Robert Schoch is on geology, but we do have a castle in Newcastle, and it's 900 years old, and it's made of similar stuff. It's made of sandstone, and that's needed some work on it. So you got a bit of a reference. It's not like 4,500 years old, like it's been claimed. Obviously, that the Sphinx is, but I think the Sphinx is a lot older. When I saw the water erosion around the edge because it's been cut out of the bedrock, the Sphinx, and I just instantly dismissed it. I mean, I've done geology at school, and there is a difference between water and wind erosion. And when I saw the water erosion around the edge, I thought, well, that looks like water erosion, but we're in the desert. And if this happened 4,500 years, if that was 4,500 years worth of rain, or well, the Sphinx is 4,500 years old, then that can't be right. So I just dismissed it out of hand. That can't possibly be water erosion. We're in the desert where there's hardly, by the name of it, well, there's hardly any water. But then Robert Schoch, his tests have shown it to be about 12,500 years old. And he said for that sort of water erosion, there has to be about 1,000 years worth of rain to have fallen. And then listening to the hypothesis from Graham Hancock, listen to the research that Randall Carlson has done. And again, go and do your own research. There's some great podcasts by Joe Rogan with these three guys in, and read some of their books, listen to some of their audibles. I listened to quite a lot of stuff on Audible, and just listen to their hypothesis, and it does make more sense that the Sphinx is older than the 4,500 years old that the Egyptologists state it is. And again, scientists, not all of them, but some of them are really wedded to their original hypothesis, where they've built a career on, studying this for 20, 30, 40 years. And if someone else who's especially not trained from an academic perspective, if they then come in and go, well, actually, I think stuff you've been pontificating about for the last sort of lifetime is completely wrong, then it's probably quite natural that they're just going to push back and go, well, how can you be right? Because I've been studying this for 3 or 4 decades. And there's a little bit of dishonesty to that, I think, in the scientific world, where people who are not sort of classically trained from an academic perspective come in and they've put all this evidence together, like Randall Carlson has and Graham Hancock, and they've literally spent decades themselves doing all this research, and they've put all these dots together and they've created a pattern out of it, and they present a hypothesis with a lot of evidence, not just them as well. Randall Carlson has presented a lot of evidence, but there's been a lot of academic research done in the last few years. And also from Graham Hancock's perspective, there's more and more academics now coming out and going, yeah, there was this Younger Dryas period event, which then caused this cataclysm, this mass flooding around the world. And overnight, there was sort of like about a 400-foot rise in sea level. So, and that's where this whole myth and legend of Atlantis comes from. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I've not seen any evidence, but I do have enough evidence to come to the conclusion that I do believe the Sphinx is a lot older than what the Egyptologists tell us. Right. Any more questions? I think that's done for now. Okay, thanks very much, everybody. That's me done. You've been marvellous. I've been Graham French, and I'll see you in the next one.